Hello, dear viewers, and welcome to another beautiful role play on GST. Now, I believe this short video will help the teachers as well as students of GST. As we grow in the subject of GST, we come across intrastate transactions and interstate transactions. Now, when we say intrastate transaction, the applicable GST is CGST and SGST. Sometimes instead of GST, we may also have the Union Territory GST. When it comes to interstate transaction, we have the application of IGST. Now, I have students of my college who have done the small role play. There will be a commentary in the background. Thereafter, they will enact what happens in case of intrastate transactions, what happens in case of interstate transactions. So let's have a look at this video.
Today we will learn about the role play as far as GST is concerned. We would require around 8 students. To begin with, we will need 2 parties, the supplier and the buyer. With the supplier, we have the goods, and with the buyer, we have the cost of inward supply as well as the GST amounts. GST can be CGST, SGST, or it can be IGST. First, we will look at an intra-state transaction. In case of an intra-state transaction, both the buyer and the seller are from same state. The transaction happens between the buyer and the seller. So when the transaction happens, the goods will move from the supplier to the buyer, and the cost plus the GST amount will move with the supplier. So once the transaction has happened, we all know that the filing of returns is within 15 days of the next month. It is the supplier's responsibility. It is the supplier's responsibility to hand over GST amount with the respective governments. CGST will be handed over to the central government, whereas the SGST amount will be handed over to the state government. So this is what happened in case of an intra-state transaction, where the buyer received the goods, whereas the supplier or the recipient received both the cost of inward supply as well as GST amount. Within the due date of filing returns, the supplier will hand over half of the amount of GST, that is CGST, with the central government, and half of the amount SGST with the state government. Now we will look at interstate transaction. Buyer is from one state and seller is from another state. The transaction happens between the buyer and the supplier. So as soon as the transaction happens, the goods move from the supplier to the buyer, and the cost plus GST, cost plus IGST will be handed over to the supplier. Within the due date of filing returns, it is the supplier's responsibility to hand over the entire IGST amount to the central government. So entire IGST amount will be handed over to the central government. Then the central government will transfer the half of the amount of GST with the respective state government where the buyer was based. So let's go through the position once again. At the end of an interstate transaction, the buyer gets goods, the supplier gets the cost of inward supply as well as IGST amount, and it is the supplier's responsibility to hand over the entire IGST amount with the central government, and later on the central government will hand over half of the GST amount to the state government where the buyer is based. This is as far as interstate transaction is concerned. This role play was enacted by all the students of Government First Grade College Kavur. As supplier we had, as buyer we had, as goods we had, as cost of inward supply we had, as the central government we had, as state government we had, as the GST, half of the amount, CGST or the entire IGST we had, and as SGST we had. Okay, thank you to all the students for enacting this role play. I hope this role play would be beneficial for students to understand the basics of the GST law. Thank you.
So we had a wonderful role play from my students, and definitely I believe you all might have understood this particular concept of GST. So thank you for watching this. We will meet again. Till that time, thank you once again.